Let's jump into the first game of this series.
BigBen versus Coldhands.
Ooh, this was much more serious than the last guys with the jazz hands and everything. No, these guys mean business.
Wow,
and they mean it quickly.
Yeah, from both players. It is going to be the aggro druid that we were hypothesizing might be the starting mirror last series, but turned out to be double Jade druid. But now it is that double aggro druid, and from Coldhands, getting a 1-drop on 1 is obviously fantastic, and living mana to follow up can be difficult to deal with. But Ben here on the coin, if he can find himself a Mark of the Lotus, maybe a Mark of Yasharaj, he could find himself pulling very far ahead.
And through the headset, I've just heard one of the other players, who was quite a long way away from me, swear about that hungry crab being in the deck. They're not impressed. Somebody's got Murlocs down there.
That's true. Wait, so that was Coldhands who had the...
Yeah.
Okay, so that's going to be very... not very good in this series, because obviously BigBen not bringing the Paladin whatsoever.
All right, so who's going to get off this fastest start here? Ben's hand obviously pretty impressive. How bad would you think Patches is in this opening hand?
So you need to talk about how bad it is to draw Patches in a lot of these matchups, because very often back in the day it was like Pirate Warrior was the worst because there was nothing to activate it with. But in this particular deck you can make it buff up a Charger with the Wolf or the Mark of the Lotus, so it's not quite as bad as it can be in some of the others. Obviously you'd rather pull it out with the Corsair, but it's not the worst in the world.
Yeah, so it's still the worst card, but
it's still the worst card to get
something out of it.
You can make it work, yeah. You can make the best out of it.
Especially if he hasn't drawn the other Pirate anyway, so it's like... Because that makes your Pirates worse as well by having it. So as long as you don't draw the Pirate, it's not so bad.
It's true, but if you can get a Captain, then all of a sudden that's a natural buff for the Patches. But yeah, I agree. Drawing the Corsair, the Bloodsail Corsair here would be very sad. So
from what we can see, obviously not from where the players can see, is Ben on a clock here because that living mana? Is that going to be a game changer when it comes down?
He does need to be ahead, I would say, at that point, because living mana, it's not a card that in its own right will just win on a board that you're behind on, but if you're on a relatively even or you're slightly ahead on board states, that will just lock out the game.
And he's looking like he should be in a position to get in front, but these big taunts don't half slow the game down, and right now if Coldhands can slow the game down, he is in position to get that living mana first, but he doesn't necessarily know, obviously, that Ben hasn't got it himself.
Yeah, and even then, if he goes for living mana on 5 and Ben doesn't kill off all of the Treants, all of a sudden the Scalebanes very possibly just won't be played for ages, so they're clogging up his hand even more. And this is the downside of maybe raising the mana curve of your deck slightly in a deck that you want to be very low and just pulling ahead on turns 1 or 2.
I think this is why Aggro Druid has never quite hit it as a Tier 1 deck that's accepted as Tier 1. I think there'll be people that put it as Tier 1. It's because you do have to put a little bit of punch in there, and exactly what you just said, when you put that punch in, it loses a bit of what it's trying to do. So you've got this perennial cycle of people putting in more and more 5-drops, right away from Bittertide Hydra in the last meta as well.
And then you lose to starts like this when he gets the 2 pair of blue cards that you definitely do not want to be seeing at this point, with double Scalebane, double living mana, and he's just going to be too far ahead for them to really be making a difference, I would say.
It's such an unfortunate draw. Anything playable would have been great for
Anything playable, yeah.
I don't think much of these aggro decks. Both players on 30. Hit each other.
I mean, it shows what this matchup's about. Obviously, as you said, the Druid of the Swarm slowed it down a fair amount so they couldn't go face, even if they wanted to. But it is just about locking down board control early on, which is exactly what Ben has afforded himself.
Yeah, obviously, when you get that board control, you hit your opponent for 14 2 turns running or something, 14 being a number that I thought was pulled at random, but it's probably come from my subconscious as Druid over the years. And you just smash them.
Whoa. Even better there, buffing 4 minions with the Power of the Wild is very, very nice indeed. It means he can continue to take value trades on all of the Treants, if he even wanted to. To be honest, it'll probably just be Ben slamming away to face turn after turn here, because as soon as he picks up Savage Roar, it's just going to be game over.
Yeah, and let's not take what Falcone said about Ben the wrong way. Ben is only wanting to be as a hobby, but it's a hobby he takes incredibly seriously.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, just to be absolutely clear on that. If people are wondering, hey, this hobby guy looks serious, that's because Ben is a very strong player and a very serious player. He just doesn't have the time to commit to being a pro.
And that's the point to take away from that statement. It's not that he's not trying, it's not that he's not a good player, it's that he doesn't have the commitment to it and the dedication to put in, full 12-hour days. He has a job, he has a life outside of Hearthstone.
And that is why he relies on because very often the part that suffers most if you're not going pro isn't necessarily your play, it's your lineup decisions, because you can't perfectly analyze what the meta is and how best to build around that. But having a teammate to confide in like Mysterious and starting to build connections with some of the other strong players around the world will be Ben's biggest asset going forward, as he delivers a stupefying amount of damage.
Yeah, it's the opposite to what I was saying about sort of Deathsy and Leroy to some extent, where they like to go with their own stuff, even though they've got those connections. Ben is not scared to say, please give me a lineup so I can practice. I mean, he'll practice for 7 to 10 days before a big tournament with a lineup that he's got from somebody, because that's the difference between being a pro and having that extra little bit of kick.
And we see there the aggro druid coming ahead for Ben, and that's got to be a little bit scary for Coldhands, because with the rogue and the priest left for Ben, the rogue, I'm not actually sure how favored of a matchup this is going to be, because traditionally it wasn't actually that good for the rogue. You just kind of fall behind to the sheer amount of stuff they could throw on the board. But if it's just minions being thrown down and not those big buffs, things like Backstab and SI could very possibly just wrestle it back into the rogue's favor.
And that's the funny thing about rogue. It's just found itself as this deck that's very strong against the most aggressive decks in the meta, because the power of Backstab, the power of SI7 Agent as early board removal tools, while also putting themselves on the board.
Yeah, Rogue's a really weird spot, because it loses so hard to Warlock that when you put it in your lineup, you have to ban that Warlock. Yeah, it's just such a massacre.
And it doesn't even do that well against Priest. So like against the two of the best decks or most represented decks, it's going to be doing pretty poorly. But if you tech it, as we saw from the Leroy, with things like the Lich King, a little bit heavier, it's definitely got a better shot against those decks like the Kazakus Priest and the Jade Druid even to an extent as well.
Again, Coldhands, this is possibly where his relative newbiness comes in. He's only been playing serious competitive Hearthstone for 6 months, where it is hard to learn a whole bunch of different styles of play, a whole bunch of different styles of decks. So maybe he has just bought 3 aggro decks and he's like, I'm good at aggro, let's stick to aggro, and maybe that lack of versatility can punish you in a finals like this.
And I have to ask you now, against an aggro druid going first and your other 2 cards are not particularly strong, could you consider keeping Anduin?
I throw it.
You throw it?
And I throw the Novice because it's not Paladin, and I probably throw the Soul Priest. Just
You've been playing a lot of this deck recently as well, Arinda. I know this. So
yeah.
I'm not surprised that you made that call. Keeping the Novice, okay, so BigBen values the cycle. I guess it's something to put on the board early, although a Radiant Elemental probably be preferable.
Yeah, I like to keep the Novice against Paladin because it actually trades with something, but against Druid, we've seen people keep Spirit Lash recently and get lambasted for it, basically, because Spirit Lash doesn't actually kill anything in Druid. It's like an auto keep. You think, oh, I've got my anti-aggro tool, and you look at your hand and you're like,
you need Thalnos.
It doesn't kill anything unless it's got Thalnos. And Novice Engineer doesn't actually trade. I think it might be too slow to keep.
I agree. I really didn't like that keep there because, yeah, like you said, what if he got a Radiant or just like anything else? Like he got a cycle here, but cycle it just by throwing it out of your hand.
Now, Radiant and Potion of Madness. That would have been a tip
Radiant, Potion of Madness, or even just playing Shadow Visions there, trying to use that time to find yourself a Dragonfire Potion or a Circle of Healing for your
Wild Pyromancer is the card that wins this matchup on its own. It just wins the matchup if you draw that card in your opening hand. So I think you go all in looking for it.
Very true. And so now here for Coldhands, very, very buff-heavy hand, but not actually all too many minions at the moment in order to do that. Patches, again, it sucks to draw it, but just having like a Stone Tusk board to throw onto the board and start actually buffing some minions it's something to do.
Yeah, and a 4/4 is difficult. Obviously, we always say it for Priest to remove. It's even more difficult to remove if you just remove their other minions. Yeah. Like it's the spells that make it hard, and Priest is pretty good at occupying the board with minions now. A Talon Priest or something will actually be quite handy here. So Coldhands is just putting down other stuff to make sure he can get rid of this 1/1 easily.
Interesting to coin out the Raven there as well, because it's not particularly putting all too much onto the board right now. Obviously, it sets up for more damage after the buffs come down on the following turn. But something like Coin Scalebane was actually looking pretty juicy to me to get it as far away from Psychic Scream as you can, and then make sure you have a very strong board around turns 4.
Yeah, there is a misconception about aggro decks sometimes that you have to win as quickly as possible. You have to build up a board your opponent can't deal with as quickly as possible. That's not necessarily doing 4 on turn 2.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Not necessarily.
Works out pretty nicely here, though. Yeah. You can obviously take the trade onto the Acolyte and then slam everything else to face. Wondering if it's even worth going for. The downsides of leaving it up would obviously be Spirit Lash and Wild Pyromancer. And I suppose it's worth trading because although you were saying Pyromancer wins this matchup, it wouldn't in this situation. It would have to be Pyro with a bunch of other stuff.
Like that as well from Coldhands, first time on the big stage. Just willing to take that second to look at the unobvious play to make sure he's doing the right thing. A lot of people just go on autopilot when they play for the first time.
Yeah.
I wonder.
Oh, so now here for Ben, he just really needs to find the circle of healing in number 1 to just clear off this board. But he can buy himself a little bit of time, I suppose, for the moment. Obviously, the Potion of Madness has a very, very nice trade to take out 2 of these minions. But he's still facing down a pretty threatening board, and he can't bulk out the rest of his mana with either the Soul Priest or the Priest of the Feast.
Yeah, just not in a great spot at all, as we do see that second Galactic Crawler of the day already. Good to see this from Ben. One of his slight weaknesses is sometimes not playing for enough tempo, going for a little bit too much card draw. Maybe that was even to do with that Novice Engineer keep we saw. But there were a lot of plays there where he could have gone not to challenge this board like this, and I like to see this way he is challenging the board with his minions.
Yeah, I agree. I think from a lot of the non-pro players, one of the biggest mistakes is trying to get the absolute optimal use out of every card you can, where obviously you'd like to hit a pirate there, but if you can actually just smack into a pirate with the Galactica on board, that's pretty good as well, and it kills off anything else just to get some tempo on the board.
We are possibly, although it's looking like it might not quite get there, going to see the difference between Lyra and Gadget Sand in this game as well. People say, why do you play Lyra? I don't like Lyra, I prefer Gadget Sand. This is why you play Lyra, though, when you do play it for this amazing 3/5 minion that comes down so much earlier.
And depending on what your rank is on ladder at the moment, it's very possibly right to put Lyra in as well, because there is a lot of aggression rolling about at the moment.
Yeah, for absolute sure. And Aggro Druid is like the daddy of aggression right now. It's like it beats all the other aggressive decks by just being quicker than them.
Yeah, I suppose.
Rogue beats them by being slower than them at the top end.
Haven't actually played it all too much, but I think after we see a quick count up here of 11 damage on board plus 8.
It's definitely lethal.
Definitely lethal.
Definitely
Coldhands takes the second game, bringing it up to a 1-1 scoreline. Looking a little bit nicer for him because this Aggro Druid was potentially looking a bit shaky. Drawing patches in that game could potentially have gone wrong, but his line of play of coining out the extra Enchanted Raven to deliver a quick lethal did work out for him in this case.
Well, there you go. Quick stat for you watching at home. Aggro Druid currently has has won 100% of the games that it's been a part of. Obviously, there was a mirror, so that doesn't quite work out for the last game. But strong start for that deck.
It is indeed. And for Ben, his Priest, I guess it's got a decent matchup against the other 2 aggressive decks, but his Rogue, he's going to be very happy that Druid is now out of the way, I suppose, so that Rogue can just get a nice matchup against the Paladin and a decent shot against the Rogue as well.
Yeah, this is where how this next game lines up actually matters. If the Rogues bump into each other, Ben may end up having to run his Priest into the Paladin, and assuming that is a Murloc Paladin, because that is the more likely deck to be brought to a tournament, I feel, that's a fairly close match. But if the Rogue bumps into the Paladin, it will destroy it most likely, and then the Priest can just sort of run over the Rogue, and that's a nice 3-1 for Ben.
Yeah, I would say it's definitely looking good here for Ben. And this is the downside, as you said, of not bringing the Warlock, because it doesn't get that necessary ban when Ben is also bringing a fairly aggressive lineup. Obviously, with the Aggro Druid, would almost certainly have banned the Warlock, I would say. It's that you get your Priest banned as Coldhands, and that would have been a really nice way to fight back against these aggressive decks from Ben.
Choice Veteran. This could be the more aggressive version. Maul as well?
Yes.
Yeah, with Maul as well, I'm pretty certain it. I doubt we'll see many, if any, Murlocs in this deck.
So where do you guys stand on the Maul is my question. I am not a fan, but I know why it's there.
I actually quite like Maul. In the aggressive, the aggro non-Murloc variant, I was running 2 for ages. I went back down to 1 for a Spellbreaker because I was seeing a lot of Warlocks. But then at the end I just said, well, I'm never beating Warlock with this tech anyway. So I'm just going to put 2 back in. And I think it works really nicely for me.
If it gets Divine Shield or +1 attack, a lot of the times you've got the board, you just win the game with that.
Divine Shield is absolutely key.
And if you don't have the board and you've got the recruits, then that's good too.
Yeah, definitely. This version is better against Rogue than the Murlocs as well. It can go wider, quicker. Rogue doesn't have fan like it used to, so it doesn't like those wide boards hitting it in his face.
I agree with that too.
I think people still feel that the Rogue is favoured, but it's definitely a lot closer in my opinion.
Yes.
So Ben going for the coin hit to get out the dagger. I think it's probably worth because the really nice trade you get on here and just the follow-up of double Firefly is a great way to lock down this early board.
Again, just exactly what we were saying earlier about Ben's play where, you know, he has been a little bit weak on the tempo in the past. Not here. He's getting rid of 2 minions on turn 2 and getting on with the removal of stuff.
And also saving back the patches for the moment, it is worth mentioning, gives him the potential to draw Keleseth on this turn, and then obviously just win, because he'd be summoning a 5/5 patches from his deck with the South Sea Captain afterwards, which would have been a little bit silly.
So Coldhands' strategy beginning to make some sense. It's extremely aggressive. Wonder what his priest is that was banned.
Yeah, I would expect it to still be Kazakus Priest, to be honest, I think, to round it out. But this is a very, very aggressive strategy. It's interesting to see because in the last couple of weeks, the strategy that Coldhands has been going for was to bring Spiteful Summoner decks. We've seen 4 aggressive decks in the Hunter, Priest, Paladin, and whatever else, like a Rogue or something, to round it out. And then you ban the Warlock, and it's done decently well for Kranich and Zixo in particular. But these super just plain aggro decks, without even the Spiteful Summoner from Coldhands, can find themselves weak to kind of some other matchups, like the Druid and the Rogue in particular as well.
It would be interesting if he brought Highlander Priest. I know when I was still actually playing Hearthstone rather than casting a lot more in tournaments, that when Patron was a thing, I didn't learn it straight away. I just assumed everyone was going to ban it.
Right.
And I wonder if he's doing this with Highlander Priest here. Just please ban my Priest so I don't have to play it. I'll just play the aggro decks I'm good at.
I feel like it's been relatively commonly accepted that Warlock would be the most banned deck in this tournament.
Yeah.
He's not even bringing it though, so he's
well,
just...
that's true. That's
yeah,
true.
so he's not brought the Warlock, so the Priest is now fair game to be banned. I mean, I'm not saying he won't have played it. Of course he will have practiced it. But maybe if he's not so comfortable with it, he actually wants it to be banned. Broader strategy around that. I don't just mean you don't want the best deck to be banned, but if you bring a strategy that allows your Priest to be banned and you can get away with it, then maybe that's a good way of playing to your strengths.
Can we talk just a little bit about how insane Coldhands' next turn is going to be? Call to Arms is already a nuts card, but when it comes with a 0-mana 5/5, that's pretty good.
Yeah, this is just going to be absurd for Coldhands, and this is what has swung the matchup back a little bit in the Paladin's favor, because the tools that Rogue got this expansion aren't particularly good against the Paladin, with the Elven Minstrel sucks in this matchup, because not only is it very slow, it bolsters their divine favors as well in the later stages of the game. But Call to Arms here for the Paladin is insanely good.
I'm interested to see how many times this SI7 agent gets shadow stepped. Is Ben just going to go
I think it's probably going to be quite a few.
Bouncy SI7 coming up.
What does he even get at this point that he would rather do? As the Juggler is summoned up first, which is perfect, but then misses both the charges.
Will it matter? Yes, it did matter.
Ben does have the Dagger double pirate play as well. No, he doesn't. He has Dagger 1 pirate.
1 pirate.
It's nowhere near the same.
Yeah.
It's not how 4 works.
It's less than 6.
I was close.
I mean, it's not that close. In the scale of numbers, yes.
In the scale of all of numbers that exist, I was kind of close.
You were infinitely close, actually.
Oh, thank you.
But
I feel much better about that now.
Now for Ben. He could get down a double SI7 agent, obviously with... Shadow Stepping it now. Play it. Shadow Step it again, yes. We could get 2 SI7 agent activations, but it's not actually that good against this board. He only really wants to hit 1 on the Juggler, obviously. And then outside of that, the non-charging deckhand, everything just feels a bit icky.
Yeah, it was the insane turn that Falcone highlighted there has come to pass, and the things came out in the right order as well.
This guy's tough.
Okay. Ben trusting that it will stick around.
I don't even think he's trusting that it will stick around necessarily. I think he's more trusting that he'll find something else useful to use the Shadow Steps on. Something like a Valspine would be absurdly good here, just to take out a Knife Juggler, and a damaged Corridor Creeper would be fine, I would say, in this instance.
Yeah, definitely showing his aggression by going for the Juggler.
I just think that turn was enough to, as you said, just to swing this matchup around. Coldhands looks to me like he's going to take this away, and I think it's because of the 0-mana 5/5 that came with the Call to Arms.
0-mana 5/5 seems a strong card
it's
when
just
your opponent
ridiculous.
hasn't got Valspine.
In a tempo matchup, it's just ridiculous. When your opponent doesn't have it, you do. Ben has it now, but he drew it too late, so it's only a 3-mana card, not 0.
Yeah. Yeah. It's getting the job done here. And for Coldhands, you know, he also, I think he navigated the early turns pretty nicely. Making sure he wasn't vulnerable to too much coming down, but from Ben, maybe could have considered taking a slightly different line of play. The coin would have been very, very impactful for him in some of the earlier turns, like, for example, being able to go coin SI instead of coin dagger. Maybe it was too valuable to keep that combo activation, because he just spent the whole game with double Shadow Step in hand doing absolutely nothing.
Good point. Just look at Coldhands, got 2 crabs in that deck. He had a Hungry Crab in his Druid deck.
And double Galactic Crawler in that deck.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how many crabs he's actually brought in this lineup to deal with the other aggro decks.
So he is clearly showing he thinks it's an aggro lineup, but he's planning to out-aggro them, basically.
Yeah, and I like somebody who will go with that reasoning. They'll go like, this is what I think it's going to be. I'm going to trust myself, which is something I've been saying about him. He's got that element of swag about him. I'm going to trust myself. I'm going to go with this, and if it's right, I'm going to win the tournament. If it's wrong, well, I wasn't expecting to win anyway.
I think that's a good line of reasoning.
Yeah, that's harsh, but fair, I think. And so far, it's looking like the strategy of not bringing Warlock is going to work out for him, and he may take his first series unless Ben can beat this Rogue twice in a row.
Right, this is where this could get dangerous. If he's over-teched his Rogue deck, you can ruin Rogue very easily. That's not easy for me to say. by messing up and over-teching it. Rogue has a very narrow band of things you can do to it.
Yep.
Yeah. But in this Rogue deck, there's not really all too much he could tech differently, because obviously he's not going to be bringing Spellbreakers in it, given that he's banned the Warlock. And so then outside of that, the real differences we see in Rogue at the moment are whether or not you put Lich King in there, sometimes finds its way through. Obviously, you can't put Galactic Crawlers in there unless you want to take out the Keleseth package and put in Eviscerate, which just seems unanimously not worth it.
Do you like Pirates?
I like Pirates a lot. I don't like one of them, but all the others I'm fairly fond of.
You don't like Swashbuckler, do you?
Hate it. But here for Ben, it's a very interesting approach, because I think a lot of people would say you keep the Valspine here, even though you're off the coin, just because of how disgustingly powerful it is in this matchup.
Yeah, a lot of the time in this mirror, you can afford to get a long way behind as long as you make sure that you have those swing turns available to you. And yeah, he's going to...
Wow, triple keep.
Okay, let's see how this works out for him. This is him saying, okay, I'm going to let you come at me, and I'm going to come back and beat you in the long game.
Ooh, and it's looking like it's going to work out for him, because Coldhands has got a decent starting game, which obviously he can fight back against with the backstabs. But double backstab for Coldhands is going to be nigh on useless for quite a few turns. Yeah,
the danger here for Ben is if Coldhand picks up Corridor Creep. I mean, that's a danger anyway, as Falcone highlighted last game, but in particular with Coldhands having the early aggression, if he can get a Corridor Creeper, Ben's attempt to come from behind will be thwarted by the Naught Mana 5/5.
But that's why you have Valspine. That's why even in the previous meta, people were saying you should keep it. But now it kind of seems even more so, because there's still the Scalebanes in there, but now there's also the Corridor Creepers, which you need an immediate answer to.
Oh,
it's back.
It's back.
Coldhands doing it an awful poker face there.
Well, Ben knows that's not Keleseth.
Yeah, as always with these LAN events, they are sat opposite each other, so he's got a good idea what that card might be right now.
Yeah, exactly. As if a card is drawn on turn 2 and your opponent makes a face that looks like they've got trapped wind, you know it's either Patches or Keleseth.
Or they rush the buffet down a bit quick.
So now Ben's plan is, you know, it's going not really according to plan, actually, to be honest, because obviously he's not being run out of the game in the early turns, but he had a hand to deal with that with Backstab and Creeper. And if your opponent doesn't do anything in the early turns, you want to capitalize on that by pushing down a huge amount of damage onto the board, not by playing an incredibly slow defensive card like Tar Creeper.
Yeah, and Coldhands, for all the aggressive start that he kept, hasn't actually been able to do a point of damage. And this time I'm not joking like I was in the Druid matchup. He should have done 8 to 10 by now if that strategy was going to work. I'm not saying it was wrong, by the way. You kept very good starting hand.
It's funny how these double aggressive decks or these aggressive mirror matches have all turned out in the direction where, oh, still at 30 health each.
Yeah, it's really weird how mirror matches can do that.
It's all down to board control.
Yeah, it's all down to 5 health taunts coming down on turns 2 or 3. It's what it actually all comes down to.
Yeah, that does help.
But here for Coldhands, although he has drawn the patches, as I was saying in the previous series, when you have Captain, you can make it work. I refuse to be the first caster to say it's good he drew patches, because someone's going to say it one day, and it's just not going to be me, okay? Because it's obviously not good that he drew patches.
It'll be me, won't it? Let's face it.
It's going to be you, and I'm waiting out for it, mate, so I can just follow up
and
afterwards.
It'll be wrong.
Yeah, of course it will.
Look forward to it. As long as you're there to punish me, it'll be fine.
But this hand for Coldhands just kind of gets weirder and weirder because how he wants to use the coin is far and away the most important thing in this situation, because obviously he was trying to fit in the highest amount of pirates in combination with the captain at once to get a huge amount of buffed charges to pull back the board. But now that he's got Bone Mare, he really wants to lock down the board on turn 5 and follow up with a coin into Bone Mare on turn 6, because if you can Bone Mare first going second, it's a really huge tempo swing.
Yeah, I'm just starting to wonder if his mouse is stuck on the end turn button and he actually can't play any cards or something, because he's just got a hand of collecting stuff right now.
And that's not that bad, because his opponent hasn't done anything for the early turn, so either he's correctly realized he's got a handful of rubbishy spells like Backstab and Shadow Step, or he's thinking it's Lich King's, Bone Mare's, Scale Veins, things like that.
Here comes the stuff. He's assessed that he can get through and start to make that push, getting that Bone Mare set up for 2 or 3 turns, like you said. And he feels he can get through. This is a lot of resources to put into 1-1-5, which is what effectively this card is.
It's a good job he drew patches so that he could deal with that type
There we go.
That's banter ball worthy, right?
Banter worthy, I would say. Good job, mate.
Gaskin is staring us down. It wasn't me, Dan. It wasn't me. It was them.
Stands up like a meerkat when there's a lion approaching.
I'm in Dan's seat right now. Anything goes.
But here for Coldhands, the fact that he will have assumed his opponent doesn't have a handful of backstabs is going to work out awfully for him, because that is exactly what Ben has access to. So by making this big push on that exact turn, Coldhands has basically relinquished board control for probably the rest of the game. That's a nice way to start pulling it back. But because he doesn't have access to coin Bone Mare, he's looking to have put himself in a much worse spot than he could have been.
Yeah, Ben's opening mulligan was to thank for that single turn there. That's the backstab, except that we talked about at the start of the game. And yeah, Ben is now in a great position to start removing all of this stuff. And what I feel he mustn't do here, depending how things work out, is get too attached to this Leroy Shadow Step combo. It's not about doing that 12 damage, it's about using your Shadow Step for extra board control. Yeah,
I definitely agree. The Shadow Step will probably be coming down on the Valspine in the next turn or 2, as Elven Minstrel is picked up, which is bad in this instance.
It's on the slow side, but at least it's going to fill up Coldhands' hand with some resources that he very much needs. Corridor Creeper, also quite slow at the moment.
He doesn't really want board, though. He just wants tempo, because he wants to make sure he can stick Bone Mare on the following turn, which there's 0 chance of happening now, as it does go into turn 7. 2 minions were drawn. BigBen will be killing off this this Elven Minstrel, especially when he picks up an SO7 agent as well.
Yeah, now he can start to keep back this Shadow Step Leroy, because it is actually representing lethal damage next turn. So what I said last turn, as usual, was a load of tosh. But no, it made sense at the time, but now new information has shown that suddenly, actually, the Shadow Step Leroy is very important as a lot of burst damage.
Yeah. And so for Coldhands, just trying, he's basically in the realms of finding something good off Swashbuckler. If he's going to play the Lotus agents here, then he is clearly indicating he's all in on finding something ridiculous.
No Vanish to be found from that Swash. Not that that would even help. That would just allow Ben to put these Saturday Chain Gangs back on the board, and then another 2 the following turn.
And I honestly think if this had been the summer finals, Ben would have lost this game. He'd have found a way. 2-1 down in the summer finals. He was looking distraught. Didn't look to be thinking clearly at all. And he's played this game really well.
I mean, there's a lot of rules in this mirror that you kind of just have to know. Like keeping the Valspine there. When I first learned this matchup, I wouldn't have dreamed of keeping that on the play. I would definitely just have saved that if you're on the coin, maybe. But it worked out massively well for him. He didn't capitalize on early board control at all. But Coldhands' turn, where he used the coin, went all in on those pirates, he was punished so hard for that.
Yeah, a little tiny bit trigger happy there. We said at the time it's a lot of stuff to put into that taunt anyway. He lost a lot of resources, and then he lost the extra resources on the counter swing from Ben, who had kept the Vilespine for that exact moment.
And the thing is, he needs to remember, is a good point as well, it was a 3-keep hand from Ben. What cards do you keep in the starting hand that you don't play for that long? It's Backstab, because there wasn't a target. It's Valspine, because you always keep that. It's not cards like Scalebane and Bone Mare, which is
they're
what
not stuck in your hand, because you've chosen those cards.
And he should have realized that and given his opponent way less effective usage of those cards when he just gave Ben the win there.
Well, there we go. This series will be going all the way to Game 5, and it's going to be Priest versus Rogue. Now, Lorinda, you were saying that you don't think the Rogue is actually that good in this matchup anymore.
Yeah, I think that's an understatement for me. I tend to overstate matchups, but I feel the Priest is massive in this matchup. The Rogue can win. if the Rogue gets all of its mid-game stuff, especially with the Scalebane still being in, it can just run the Priest out of stuff, but Psychic Scream has made this such a good matchup for the Priest now.
I'm definitely closer to the midpoint. I would like my chances as the Rogue here, but I definitely agree with Neil that it is favoured for the Priest, especially when they pick up a very respectable starting hand such as this one. Kazakus, obviously absurd in every matchup. And then the Dragonfire a little bit later on.
That's 3 board clears.
Worth considering keeping.
Actually, with Lyra, it's infinite board clears, technically, but only the Kazakus gets kept. Ben gets Raza. Just needs Anduin and Vel, and he's good to go.
He is. Interesting that he didn't keep the Dragonfire. I'm not sure where most people stand on that one. It's a card that you can definitely get to. It's not like the aggro Druid match where if you keep it, it might just not. You might be dead on turn 5. You can definitely get there, but the Kobold Scalebane, the big deal.
That's the thing. It's against the aggro Druid, you may just be dead, but against the Rogue, it's very possibly you may just be facing a Scalebane, and then you can't afford to keep a 6-mana card that does nothing until turns 8 or something.
And this is where I think Priest is underestimated even by the people that hate it. This is going to be able to occupy the board with minions.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter that he hasn't got stuff to blow your cards up with, because he's going to play better minions than you for 3 or 4 turns whilst picking up good spells.
Yeah, and this is something I was talking to Meaty about on Twitter when he cut Binding Heal from his list, and I was saying, do you not really miss the healing? And while I'm sure most people would say that does deserve a deck slot, he was just saying I'm ahead on board the majority of the time. I play this deck for tempo, for board control, really hard.
It's interesting now because I did not know he'd cut it, and I cut Binding Heal a while ago. I don't talk about it much because it's my own personal cut that I have fun with. But I like the extra Gnomish Inventor for the extra card draw, personally.
He's very possibly back to using it again. I don't want to name
and when you check stat sites, it is usually the 29th or 30th best card.
Right,
It's just got such good interactions with the rest of the deck. The problem is you put more card draw in, as Dan has a exclamation there as the 5/8 appears in the hand.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was just...
is you do end up struggling to empty your hand.
I got the trap wind look on my
Oh, right,
Luckily, Ben didn't. Ben was very subtle about it, but if I was playing against Coldhands right now, he would definitely know what I just drew.
Yeah, the main problem if you don't play Binding Heal is you end up with a lot of stuff stuck in your hand that you can't empty your hand.
Exactly.
It's very clunky.
Yeah. And especially against Paladin, where you want to heal and dump your hand as quickly as possible, it's the double usage. But for the moment here, Ben has the interesting choice of whether he goes for 1 or 5 on the Kazakus potion, because he kind of wants to dump some of the cards from his hand, and the 1-cost potion will have some nice synergy with the Wild Pyromancer, so I wouldn't actually have hasted that at all. But there is the obvious upside of getting 4 damage AoE on the 5-mana Kazakus spell, which can be so impactful.
Cold Hand this time actually making Ben think that he did just draw patches, because that was not a look of happiness after the Kalaseth got picked up.
Twasn't indeed.
Yeah, that's the look of where were you? You're late to the party.
So these creepers can be brought down to 3. Well, okay, they could be brought down lower with like charging South Sea and
Suicidal
patches.
deckhands.
Yeah, I suppose so. They could come down to 2 if you wanted to play both. So it could be what, deckhand patches, double corridor creeper, but that's I think a bit too risky when your opponent still has the coin and they're going into turn 5 because of obviously Dragonfire.
Yeah, this is a turn where you've got to find a way to make the Priest use that Dragonfire without putting your creepers down, and then you play them afterwards.
I agree.
So I think we'll see. Yeah, Coldhands is going to take a risk here. It's going to be likely punished. This is where Ben could have taken a 1 spell. This is where I don't feel he put enough time into that potion decision because of the Pyromancer, but
even if he picks a 5 spell, as long as, I mean, this is Coldhands saying, if he's got 4 damage AoE, I'm losing anyway, which, okay, so he picks his poison. If he plays both corridor creepers here, he's praying, I hope he doesn't have Dragonfire. If he plays all these small minions, he's praying he didn't get AoE off the Kazakus potion. But unfortunately for him, Ben's got both, and he's got Raza, and he's got Anduin.
The only reason I mentioned the 1 potion is you're more likely to get the AoE, and you don't need a big AoE.
Very good point. I agree. I think this is such a full hand, he should have gone for 1 mana.
Is Elun's will?
And so even though I think we're going to see Ben end up ultimately winning this game, it'd be interesting to see how awkward it is for the next 2 or 3 turns just because he hasn't got the nice smooth flow. But
well, I don't think we actually saw what options he got on the Kazakus potion, and this clearly indicates that he does not have access to the 4 damage AoE. Maybe he does, or he was afraid of overdrawing if he went for it in combination with the draw, but you don't care about that because you already have Raza and Anduin, and so you will win as long as you don't die in terms of damage.
Right, just to point out what he's doing here, his plan is to play the Dragonfire next turn and then to coin Anduin and clear any big stuff like Corridor Creepers the turn after.
This is absolutely
he
fine.
takes it.
Yeah. This is not a bad play. I'm not going to dispute that. But it does, as you said, allow the potential for a lot of damage to come down here. Like Leroy would have brought him down to 3. Leroy Coldblood would have won, although Coldblood is probably not in most decks now.
Probably not, but if it's going to be in anybody's deck, Coldhands is a player who could have Leroy Coldblood. We were saying don't have too many tech choices. That's one that somebody like Coldhands, who's playing very aggressively, could have ended up with.
Wow, so Coldhands could just go all out on praying that there's no Anduin here, which actually, if there is Anduin, he loses anyway, doesn't he? So maybe he should just go super all out with the Bone Mare this turn.
I mean, another option is to play 1 Creeper and play the Chain Gang, and that way the Anduin doesn't really do it against the Creeper because you Bone Mare up the Chain Gang and you've got the second Creeper. I
think the consideration here isn't Anduin, it's Psychic Scream, because against Anduin you're losing anyway, because obviously if it doesn't, even if it doesn't clear your board, you're just dead in a couple of turns. But against Psychic Scream, you can put forward enough stuff on board to kill them just with 1 Creeper and the Chain Gang, as you said, but still have game if they clear it with the Psychic Scream.
Yeah, I think that's a good spot. I think that's what I feel that's the right play here, is just you've got enough chance to tease it, and it's enough damage because your opponent's on 11.
Also, like, really taking it down to the simple level of the stress that Coldhands may be feeling on stage. Does he know for sure Ben still has the coin? Is that something that he'll have been tracking? Is that something that maybe will have slipped his mind? Psychic Scream is something that you know comes down on turn 7 regardless of the coin.
Yeah. Wow, so taking it... Okay, yeah, going with the line of play we were thinking, and I think this is right. I know Coldhands will have thought about this. This line of play indicates he obviously knows the coin is there, because... Well, even not necessarily, because he still loses to Anduin no matter what, basically.
Yeah.
But as long as he can protect himself...
It's interesting how tough that choice was, and he's still agonising now. And I'm looking at it thinking there's a good case for not playing that Creeper in his mind. I can see why he's so back and forth on it. He's still not sure about the play. You've made the play. Work out what you're doing on the next turn, though. I'm
actually looking at it now and wondering if Coldhands wins with Leroy here, though, because he'll have 6 damage, 6 and 12. Nah, wouldn't even win with that, because I'm thinking he has to go coin Anduin, which doesn't clear anything off the board apart from the Corridor Creeper.
What is a loon's
And so Ben will be thinking, you know, if I go coin Anduin, I lose to Leroy Shadowstep, which is potentially a risk he doesn't need to take.
Yeah, and he knows that Coldhands has obviously had a close decision. And he'll know there's a buff of some sort, or Leroy, there'll be damage in hand.
Wow. Going with the Glimmer Root. That seems like an incredibly slow thing to do.
Yeah, you want to be greedy with this deck, but sometimes if you get greedy against Rogue, you do just lose.
Yeah.
That's one of the downsides of playing against Rogue, is you can just give them too much time.
I can definitely see why he doesn't want to go for Anduin, although it would have turned out to have been correct here, I think. Because he wants to get a little bit more value out of it afterwards. But with the Shadow of Death and the 0 mana hero power, he could have cleared off anything that comes down. It was mainly just being the fact that he dies to Leroy and Shadowstep he was afraid of. But even then, I feel like this maybe wasn't the best way to go about it. Just playing at the Glimmer here just feels slow.
And obviously Coldhands has to go for the Bone Mare. He's seen that there might not be an Anduin, and even if there is, you know, you'll put your opponent so low, you might be able to draw your own Leroy anyway.
Yep.
And so this is obviously going to be an Anduin on this turn for Ben. Can even ping off the Saronite Chain Gang as well. Bring himself up to 9 health. Coldhands winces. That is the one card he did not want to see.
It is, and Ben should be okay from here. But again, this is where Rogue is annoying. It does come back at you a little bit. Just for a turn or two. The Leroy... We've seen both Bone Mares, both Creepers. That's the downside. But there are things that can be picked up here, like this.
I mean, it's a strong card. These have been very, very strong top decks, actually, for Coldhands for the last few turns with double Bone Mare and a Chain Gang. But I just don't think it's going to quite get there. For Ben, he's still got the Shadow of Death. Whatever that Kazakus potion is, it can only be so bad.
It's a Crane potion. It's just got 2 absolute blanks written on it.
I mean, what could it possibly be that does nothing?
Like armor or something.
Armor's fine. Freeze is fine.
Would you please hover over that card for us so we can take a look at what it is? Ben?
And Demons is really the only thing that does absolutely nothing, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, there's just... And even then, he'd probably just draw 2 axes.
Yeah. Whatever.
Get rid of his hero power and lose the game. Might not work too well. No, but it's got to do something. That's the point. Even the garbage wants to do something at this point.
And so for Coldhands here, just wondering, is it worth playing out my Bone Mare right now? Because I kind of want to get the charge, pseudo charge effect of buffing a minion right away and attacking to face. But this can just be cleared up too easily. This, I think, is too passive of a play.
Right.
Oh, especially with the pickup of Spirit Lash here. Like, you can just go Death in combination with the Priest of the Feast, in combination with the Spirit Lash. You heal up for so much damage at the same time.
Yeah, we've got to give a nod to Ben's planning here. He's kept that Priest and the Feast in his hand for a long time for this situation.
Okay. We saw draw 2 cards then.
Okay. I think we can assume that, because we saw that on the second one. And anything that's this passive that can't have come down for this long probably has to be something like that.
Yeah, and despite the fact it's not the way we called it, Ben has planned out how he wanted this game to come out. He's managed to keep the Shadow Word Death for emergencies, like I keep saying. Rogue sometimes has that final sting in the tail, and he's got it all covered. And Ben definitely showing the experience that he learned from Summer. He's taken that home, he's thought about it, and he's a lot more solid and professional this time around. I think DreamHack helped him a lot with this.
I agree. And I think for Ben, although on that turn where he played the Glimmer Root and the Shadow Word Pain, it maybe wasn't the absolute optimal way to play it. It was perfectly good enough in that instant. He'd been dealt such a good hand that he just needed to make sure he wasn't dying. And that's obviously why he didn't want to go for the Coin Anduin, was to protect himself against Leroy and Shadow Step. And maybe that just worked out with the best way of the mana to protect himself against every possible eventuality, but he came very, very close to dying.
The fact he's pointing out a face means he's calculated as lethal.
Is that the lethal face?
That is
the
point
face.
at your opponent's face. So this might be damage or something in his Kazaka's potion.
I mean, whatever. I think he's got lethal even outside of that. Like,
yeah, exactly.
It's over, which means Ben is moving up in the winners' brackets, whereas Coldhands is going to be dropping down to the losers. Only one loss from losing and being eliminated from this tournament.
Whereas Ben guaranteed top 6 from this first win. We'll be seeing him again tomorrow in the final day. She Death. Wonder if Pavel's learned what the secrets do now.
Yeah, that was quite an amusing moment with Pavel earlier in the year at Seat Story.
Last year, actually,
Neil.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same.
I can say it says deal 5 damage. I saw with the little screen shake there.
So it was super lethal.
I was just about to say we'll probably never know what the potion does, but hey, there you go. I'm happy now. Hope you guys are too. And Ben certainly feeling quite happy here. Stage fright, not